The NFL hasn't even kicked off the 2026 season yet, but tensions in Pittsburgh are already making headlines. Aaron Rodgers has just joined the Steelers in a blockbuster one-year deal, reuniting with head coach Mike McCarthy, a move that was supposed to bring experience and stability. But now, reports suggest that McCarthy is already having second thoughts about the decision, and the locker room situation is starting to raise serious questions before a single snap has been played. So in this video, we break down what's really going on behind the scenes, why this reunion is already under pressure, and how things may be falling apart faster than anyone expected. On May 16, 2026, the 42-year-old quarterback agreed to a one-year deal to return to the Pittsburgh Steelers, re-signing with the team and reuniting with their new head coach, Mike McCarthy, for the 2026 season. The deal pays Rodgers somewhere between $22 million and $23 million in base salary, with incentives bringing the total up to $25 million. That's a significant raise. He earned $13.65 million on his previous one-year deal. So the Steelers are paying nearly double for a quarterback who is about to turn 43 in December. Now, to understand why so many people are calling this a ticking time bomb, you have to understand what led up to this moment. Rodgers kept the Steelers in limbo throughout the offseason for the second straight year, but all signs pointed to him eventually returning. This wasn't a situation where a franchise moved quickly, locked up their guy, and started building towards September. This was a hostage situation, dressed up as free agency. The future Hall of Famer once again took an extended period of time to decide whether he wanted to return to the field for the 2026 campaign, leaving the Steelers in a tough position. Rodgers put the Steelers in a tough spot, as they were unable to truly map out the 2026 campaign without a solid answer from their presumed starting quarterback. Think about that for a second. You're a franchise entering a new era, new head coach, new coaching staff, new scheme, and your starting quarterback won't even tell you if he's going to show up. Steelers president Art Rooney, too, told NFL Network that he remained confident Rodgers would be the team's quarterback in 2026 and believed the uncertainty would wrap up soon. However, Rooney also said at the NFL's annual meeting in late March that the Steelers expected an answer from Rodgers by the NFL draft, which didn't happen. The draft came and went. Still no answer from Rodgers. The front office took a step toward ensuring that if Rodgers suited up in 2026, it would be with the Steelers and not another team. They placed an unrestricted free agent tender on Rodgers, a rare tactic that guarantees the Steelers a 2027 compensatory draft pick if the veteran quarterback signs elsewhere, and bars Rodgers from negotiating with other teams until July 22nd. That's how desperate Pittsburgh was to hold on to a 42-year-old quarterback. They had to use a rarely deployed mechanism just to keep other teams from swooping in. And here's the thing, the market for Rodgers' services during the 2025 offseason wasn't very robust. The Minnesota Vikings were reportedly his first choice, but removed themselves from the running. That left the Steelers and New York Giants as his two options in the end. So it's not as though Rodgers was juggling a dozen suitors. Teams might be even less inclined to offer a contract this time around, when his limitations as a passer were more glaring. Yet Pittsburgh waited, and waited, and kept waiting. All of this came after Steelers GM Omar Khan hinted to fans that this wouldn't be a long saga with Rodgers in the 2026 offseason. That hint turned into weeks, then months, and the longer Rodgers took, the more it impacted everything the franchise was trying to do. Now here's where this story gets layered. Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers aren't two strangers meeting for the first time. Returning to the Steelers in 2026 would mean a reunion between Rodgers and McCarthy, his coach for 13 seasons with the Green Bay Packers. 13 seasons. That's longer than most marriages. And just like many marriages, this one had a very public, very messy ending. It's been called miraculous that Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy lasted for nearly 13 years together in Green Bay, because apparently the quarterback had some serious issues with the Packers' former coach that dated all the way back to 2005. Before McCarthy was even Rodgers' head coach, there was friction. In 2005, McCarthy was the offensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. That draft, McCarthy reportedly preferred Alex Smith over Rodgers. According to former Packers running back Ryan Grant, Rodgers never forgave McCarthy for passing on him. Grant told Bleacher Report that Rodgers was upset that Mike passed on him, that Mike actually verbally said that Alex Smith was a better quarterback. 1 year later, McCarthy was hired as Green Bay's head coach, and that grudge, according to a deep investigation into what happened in Green Bay, Rodgers seemed to loathe his coach from the moment McCarthy was hired. Nobody holds a grudge in any sport like Rodgers. And no, Rodgers would not forget that McCarthy had helped perpetuate his 4.5-hour wait in the NFL draft green room the year prior. Despite all of that, the two men produced extraordinary results. The duo led the Packers to the playoffs in 9 of their 13 years together. Rodgers won 2 MVP awards over that period. They also combined to win a Super Bowl, taking down the Steelers in Super Bowl XLV, and made 2 other trips to the NFC Championship game. On paper, this was one of the most successful coach-quarterback partnerships in NFL history. Behind closed doors, it was anything but smooth. According to reports, Rodgers didn't respect McCarthy because he felt that his coach had a low football IQ. The story also states that Rodgers got tired of seeing his receivers run the same routes all the time, which only happened because McCarthy refused to change his offense. To fix things, Rodgers apparently decided to start changing the plays that McCarthy was calling on the field, which happened nearly 1/3 of the time. Let that sink in. 1/3 of the plays McCarthy called from the sideline were being changed by Rodgers at the line of scrimmage because the quarterback didn't trust his coach's game plan. Anyone could see the Packers quarterback and head coach were headed for divorce, well before the inconceivable 20-17 loss to the lowly Cardinals in December, the one that finally got McCarthy fired. Death stares and defiance from Rodgers had been constant for years by then. There were sideline blow-ups captured on camera. There was the NFC Championship game on January 18, 2015, when McCarthy coached calling for field goals from the 1-yard line twice in the first half, and then running 3 straight times with 5 minutes left, a sequence that infuriated his quarterback. And there was the 2013 loss in Cincinnati, when Rodgers and McCarthy appeared close to throwing punches. The union ended on a sour note with McCarthy fired mid-season in 2018. Rodgers then collected a pair of Associated Press NFL MVP awards once McCarthy was run out of town. That timing, Rodgers winning 2 more MVPs the moment McCarthy was gone, told a story on its own. So when the Steelers announced they were hiring McCarthy to replace Mike Tomlin in January 2026, the question on everyone's mind was simple. Would Rodgers want to come back and work with a man he once seemed to despise? Not everyone believes time has healed these wounds. In fact, some people who watch the Rodgers-McCarthy dynamic up close are sounding alarms that this reunion in Pittsburgh is headed for disaster. During an appearance on Pittsburgh sports radio station 93.7 The Fan, NFL insider Tyler Dunne of Go Long shared what he learned from a source familiar with Rodgers and McCarthy. The source said they will be at each other's throats and fighting in no time. He added that the source saw this up close, and that while they'll say all the right things, the season is a marathon. It's hard to see this ending well for any party involved. Dunne wasn't finished. He went further, saying that calling it friction and tension was probably being nice. It was bad, he said. We're talking 7.5 years ago, so it's been a while. As time passes, maybe the heart grows fonder. He then compared the reunion to a middle-aged man on Facebook, looking up the old high school flame, out of options, not really sure where to turn. That's a devastating analogy, and it speaks to something important. Dunne was referencing how there doesn't seem to be any other team that is all that interested in signing Rodgers this spring. The implication is that Rodgers isn't going back to McCarthy because the relationship is great. He's going back because there's nowhere else to go. Toward the end of their Packers union, reports surfaced that Rodgers and McCarthy began bumping heads over the changing of play calls, stale offensive game plans, and a lack of communication, to name a few issues. According to Dunne, a former Packers teammate who had a front row seat to Rodgers and McCarthy's issues in Green Bay, believes a similar story could be on the horizon in Pittsburgh, and he believes Rodgers and McCarthy will be at each other's throats and fighting in no time. Now, both men have publicly taken the high road since parting ways. Back in March, Rodgers insisted that he has so much love for Mike, an appreciation for the time we spent together. McCarthy added that when he thinks of Rodgers, he thinks of their one-on-one conversations, and that it always ended with a hug and "I love ya." Beautiful words, but words said to cameras and microphones, not in the heat of a 3-game losing streak in November, when the offense is struggling and the play calls aren't working. When McCarthy was fired by the Packers before the end of the 2018 NFL season, there was visible friction between the head coach and Rodgers. However, in the years since, the two have patched things up and have been on great terms, and there was even a moment that made many believe this reunion was meant to be. When Rodgers was released by the New York Jets, he was asked where he wanted to play next, and his response was, "Wherever Big Mike ends up." Still, the warnings from people who watched it implode the first time are hard to ignore. One person who used to be close to the quarterback described Rodgers as forever conflict-averse and passive-aggressive to the extreme. Someone who'd rather stuff problems deep down inside and pretend there's no issue rather than communicate. Rodgers usually chose mid-game tantrums over constructive conversations. If that pattern reemerges in Pittsburgh during a critical stretch of the 2026 season, this reunion could unravel in spectacular fashion. Beyond the interpersonal drama, there's a cold, hard football question at the center of this. Is Aaron Rodgers even good enough anymore to justify the cost and the headache? He started 16 games last season, his first in Pittsburgh, totaling 3,322 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. On the surface, those numbers look respectable. Dig deeper, and the picture is far less flattering. The Steelers' offense was pretty average last season. It ranks 17th in yards per play and 16th in points per drive. By advanced numbers, it was 21st in success rate and 16th in EPA per play. Perhaps surprisingly for a Rodgers-led team, the Steelers' passing attack was the weaker half of its offensive identity. That last point is staggering. Aaron Rodgers, a 4-time MVP, a man whose entire legacy is built on throwing the football, was leading a team whose passing game was its weakness. At this stage of his career, Rodgers has been less willing to throw the football downfield. In 2025, few quarterbacks attempted more passes less than 10 yards downfield than Rodgers. Nearly 68% of his attempts traveled within 10 yards, according to PFF, and 22.9% of those attempts were behind the line of scrimmage, also one of the highest rates in the league. He was, in essence, running a glorified dink and dunk offense, and he wasn't even doing that at a high level. Rodgers has been below average in dropback success rate in 2 consecutive years. Last season, he was 33rd of 38 qualified quarterbacks. He isn't good enough to play like this anymore. Rodgers also does not handle pressure well at this stage. According to PFF, his completion percentage dropped to 40.6% in 2025 when under pressure, and his passing grade plummeted to 42.5 out of 100. Among quarterbacks with at least 100 plays under pressure, Rodgers ranked 31st out of 31 passers in success rate and 29th in EPA per play, dead last. The man who once made off-script magic look routine was now the worst quarterback in the league when the pocket collapsed. By just about every stat available, Rodgers was the worst quarterback to make the postseason in 2025. In the postseason itself, reality hit Pittsburgh squarely in the face in the playoffs. The Steelers had just 175 yards of offense against the Texans. The future Hall of Famer's season ended on a pick-6 he threw in that loss to the Texans, a play uncharacteristic of his historic career. Last season's Steelers devolved into what ESPN described as a check-down, 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 check-down Have operation that produced no consistency. And now, the Steelers are paying $25 million for the same quarterback to do it all over again. Only he'll be a year older, in a division featuring Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, and in a conference that has Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, Drake May, and Patrick Mahomes. It's simply too daunting to put chips on a Rodgers-led team in 2026. While free agency is never rich with elite passers, there were better options for the Steelers than this. Kyler Murray would have been a better and far cheaper player. He signed with the Vikings for the veteran minimum of $1.3 million. Rodgers is already in his 40s, and while his football intelligence remains elite, quarterbacks at this stage rarely reinvent their physical profile. Arm strength does not increase. Mobility does not return. Throwing windows do not suddenly get larger. The version of Rodgers that Pittsburgh saw in 2025 is likely the version they would see again in 2026. The bigger picture, Pittsburgh's paralysis, and this brings us to the uncomfortable truth behind the entire situation. The Aaron Rodgers signing isn't just about Rodgers or McCarthy. It's about a franchise that refuses to rip the Band-Aid off and rebuild. Having Rodgers reunite with his former Green Bay Packers head coach is an enticing scenario on paper. But in reality, it's a temporary Band-Aid that's not going to accomplish anything of substance, and is a move aimed at avoiding bottoming out and keeping the illusion of a true contender, when there's no real hope of that being the case. ESPN's Dan Graziano put it plainly: no team seems to enjoy its status quo as much as the Steelers do. They haven't had a losing season since 2003. They've made the playoffs 17 times this century. No team has won more Super Bowls than the Steelers. They're consistent contenders year in and year out. but being consistently good enough has become its own prison. For now, they're once again willing to wait on a 42-year-old who hasn't been a top 20 quarterback by QBR since 2021, because he's competent enough to keep them afloat. Competent enough to keep them afloat. That's the ceiling. Pittsburgh is paying $25 million for. Meanwhile, the front office has a very real quarterback problem. It has missed recent opportunities to address that problem through the draft and in free agency. Match that with missed draft choices like Kenny Pickett and unsuccessful reclamation projects, Dwayne Haskins, Mitchell Trubisky, Justin Fields, and Russell Wilson. And what you get is the current reliance on a fading Aaron Rodgers. The Steelers also had the opportunity to sign Sam Darnold last offseason. They chose Rodgers instead. Darnold went on to lead the Seattle Seahawks to a Super Bowl championship. Pittsburgh got a first-round playoff exit. That contrast is haunting. And what about the future? In addition to Rodgers, the Steelers have 2018 third-round pick Mason Rudolph, 2025 sixth-round pick Will Howard, and 2026 third-rounder Drew Aller. The franchise's best course of action would have been to allow Will Howard and rookie third-round pick Drew Aller to split the reps throughout the offseason, alongside Mason Rudolph, all while battling it out for the starting job. But that plan won't come to fruition if Rodgers is around. McCarthy, to his credit, has been investing real time in developing Aller. He was seen being super hands-on in practices, coaching players individually, especially Aller. Aller and the coach have said they're starting from scratch, retooling Aller's mechanics, form, and footwork. Pittsburgh insider Mark Kaboly was impressed by Aller's physical tools during rookie minicamp. He described the arm action as elite, noting that it just jumps, and that in 25 years of watching minicamps, he'd never seen a spiral like that. But the fact that the coaching staff is completely tearing down Aller's form means fans probably won't see him on the field in 2026. If Rodgers returns as expected, Aller likely won't see the field except for preseason and injury fill-in spots during the 2026 campaign. So Rodgers' presence doesn't just cost $25 million. It costs the franchise an opportunity to develop its future. Former Steelers offensive lineman Trey Essex added fuel to the concern during a recent appearance on 93.7 The Fan, suggesting the situation could create real tension in the locker room if it drags on. According to Essex, the uncertainty around Rodgers' future had the potential to become a crisis if players were left without clarity heading into the new season. TJ Watt has yet to experience postseason success despite his individual greatness, and players like Cam Hayward are in the later stages of their careers where urgency matters most. It's feasible that Watt, Highsmith, Ramsey, and Hayward will not be on the team in 2027, meaning the defense could be effectively gutted beyond the 2026 season. The window isn't just closing, it's practically shut. And the Steelers are spending $25 million on a 42-year-old quarterback who ranked last in the league under pressure, to pair with a head coach he historically clashed with, in a division that features Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. So will the Steelers be any better this season? Never say never. ESPN's Benjamin Solak noted that he watched them start 11-0 with the husk of Ben Roethlisberger in 2020. Rodgers can certainly do this season what Roethlisberger did then. In other words, the very best case scenario for this Rodgers signing is that it mirrors one of the most hollow starts to a season in recent Steelers history, a run that ended with 4 straight losses and an early playoff exit. The Packers may have won a Super Bowl with McCarthy, but there's an argument that the team should have won more. Considering Rodgers' excellence, McCarthy often gets the blame for that, and he didn't exactly extinguish that narrative when he was with the Cowboys. In Dallas, the sides parted ways following a 7-10-2024 campaign, after they could not agree to terms on a new deal. McCarthy's reputation as a coach who wins in the regular season but wilts in the postseason followed him from Green Bay to Dallas and now follows him to Pittsburgh. The Steelers are betting that 2 men who fell apart once before, in far better circumstances, can somehow hold it together in what is objectively a worse situation: an older quarterback, a weaker roster, and a tougher conference. History says that's a losing bet. The football says that's a losing bet. The people who watched it happen the first time say that's a losing bet, and the season hasn't even started.